During a family meal, Dad nonchalantly declared, "We're heading to Europe, excluding you." My sister, Ashley, the perpetual favorite, chimed in with her own remark. I paused, anticipating a humorous twist, but before I could react, Ashley, beaming as if she'd just shared the most brilliant joke, interjected. The table erupted in a strained, hesitant laughter, the kind that leaves everyone wondering if it's appropriate to be amused. While I wasn't truly angry, it was another instance that highlighted my perpetual outsider status. This wasn't a new experience. Over the past few years, my parents had embarked on 4 major trips without including me. I'd consistently fabricated reasons: work commitments, scheduling clashes, and so on. But this evening, I decided to stop the charade. So when their laughter erupted, I joined in, surprising them all. I reclined in my chair and inquired, "What financial resources are you considering for this journey?" Mom and Dad shared a puzzled glance. "What are you saying?" Dad questioned, his smile disappearing. I let out a chuckle and shook my head. "Remember how Ashley and her spouse spent every penny you gave them? They did it in the blink of an eye." Ashley's features tightened, her voice sharp as she retorted, "That's a lie." Her father's countenance grew grim as he pressed, "What funds are you referring to?" I let out a heavy sigh and revealed the truth. "The funds you entrusted to Ashley and Josh for their house savings. It's not being used for a down payment. It's completely vanished. They're squandering it on nights out, dining, and frivolous things. The accounts you established for them are depleted." A stunned silence fell over the room. Dad's gaze darted from Ashley to Josh, whose face expressed a desperate desire to disappear. Mom's jaw hung open, struggling to comprehend my words. "Ashley, Kevin is lying," she exclaimed. "However," Ashley retorted, "you always sabotage my happiness. You invent lies to pit Mom and Dad against me." I dismissed his claim with a shrug, saying, "You're welcome to examine the accounts yourself. It won't take much time to determine who's being truthful." Josh remained quiet, his gaze fixed on his plate, as if wishing everyone would simply overlook his presence. Ashley glared at him, her anger intensifying. Suddenly, the dispute erupted. My parents, voices raised, started berating Ashley and Josh, demanding explanations, to which Ashley responded with sharp retorts of her own. I took a moment to observe the unfolding pandemonium, a sense of culmination washing over me as if all the past instances of preferential treatment, broken vows, and unspoken resentments were reaching their peak. I'd reached my limit. Discreetly, I rose and left, unnoticed by anyone. What was supposed to be a joyous occasion for Ashley had devolved into an all-out conflict. To be frank, I didn't experience any guilt whatsoever, having been treated as an insignificant presence for years, only included in family gatherings due to Grandma's insistence. I believe they deserve this. Perhaps now they'd truly recognize Ashley for the person she is. The following morning, my phone buzzed incessantly with messages and missed calls from my parents, inquiring about my whereabouts and well-being, as though they had only just recalled my existence. I hesitated to reply, uninterested in re-engaging with their turmoil after the previous night's chaos. When I finally returned Mom's call, her voice trembled with agitation. "Kevin, why didn't you inform us earlier?" she exclaimed. A chuckle escaped my lips. "Do you suppose you would have listened if I had?" She paused, clearly contemplating my words, likely understanding that I'd been correct from the start. For years, they'd always taken Ashley's side, the flawless, untouchable golden child, leaving me as the constant underdog. Even when I lost my last job, it wasn't just the sympathetic glances they offered. It was the dismissive air they carried, as if I was insignificant in their eyes. If Grandma hadn't always made sure I attended family events, they likely would have eventually stopped extending invitations to me. We reviewed the finances afterward, and Mom confessed, "You were correct, Kevin. Ashley and Josh have been recklessly spending their savings for quite some time." I'd gotten whispers from shared acquaintances who'd spotted them at fancy restaurants and bustling nightclubs. While I hadn't intended to speak up, after Dad's revelation last night, I couldn't stay silent. It wasn't just about the Europe trip. It was about a long-standing sense of being excluded. "What happens next?" I inquired, my tone driven by curiosity rather than worry. Your dad is incredibly upset, Mom murmured. He's been arguing with Ashley nonstop this morning. Josh left a while ago and hasn't returned. We're still trying to determine our next steps. Her tone became gentler. Kevin, honey, I'm truly sorry for everything. We were oblivious to how serious things had become between you and Ashley. We want to fix this. Unsure of what to say, I simply replied with okay. The call ended, and I sat in silence, absorbing everything. I wasn't certain if this newfound change was sincere. Was it truly heartfelt, or simply a reaction to the disastrous outcome with Ashley? A piece of me even questioned if their shift was driven by shame for their previous blindness. Nevertheless, a glimmer of hope flickered within me. Perhaps, just perhaps, things could finally take a turn for the better. That afternoon, my dad called, initially venting about his disappointment in Ashley and his view of Josh as a parasite. But then he took a turn. Kevin, he said, your mom and I have been discussing things, and we want to make amends. Why don't you join us on a trip? Just the three of us. No Ashley. I fought back a smile. You're actually serious? Right, he responded. We're considering a straightforward drive along the coast, just to enjoy some good, old-fashioned time together. You deserve that, at the very least. The concept was entirely novel. Just a year prior, the notion of my parents taking me on a solo trip would have seemed impossible. But here they were, attempting to reconcile. It felt peculiar, yet gratifying, as if all those years of being disregarded were finally yielding positive results. I'll give it some thought, I replied, attempting to appear nonchalant. All right, keep us updated, Dad said, then ended the call. I sensed this conflict wasn't finished. Ashley wouldn't concede defeat easily, and I suspected Josh wouldn't remain committed for long, particularly with my parents now opposing her. However, for the first time in ages, a sense of advantage washed over me. It wasn't purely about revenge, although a touch of it was present, but primarily about finally being acknowledged. They couldn't dismiss me any longer. The following day, Ashley called, and though I hesitated to pick up, my curiosity won out. I suspected she'd either offer an apology or erupt in anger. With her, it was always a choice between those two extremes. So, you think you're something special now, huh? She spat the moment I answered. I let out a weary sigh. What is it you're after, Ashley? It was completely inappropriate to bring that up in public, she exclaimed, her voice laced with anger. You've destroyed everything. Josh is furious. My marriage is on the line, and my parents are relentlessly questioning me. All thanks to your inability to control your words. Perhaps you should have considered the consequences before squandering their funds. This isn't on me, Ashley, I retorted. You put yourself in this situation. You may believe you're superior, but you've been jobless for months, relying on Grandma's generosity. The only reason you were invited to dinner was due to her pleading with them. And now, here you are, destitute, while I'm not. Good luck trying to justify this to Mom and Dad. She snarled before ending the call. It was classic Ashley, always deflecting responsibility when faced with setbacks. I assumed that would be the end of our communication for a period of time, but I was mistaken. However, later that day, Mom called back. Kevin, please come over. The situation is worsening. Josh has moved out, and Ashley is in a very fragile state. She's making unsettling statements. A wave of hesitation washed over me. A part of me wished to remain uninvolved, yet the weight of guilt was too heavy to ignore. Even with our constant disagreements, I couldn't bear the thought of anything harmful befalling her. I'll arrive shortly, I assured her. Upon my arrival at my parents' residence, a palpable sense of unease hung in the air. Ashley was pacing restlessly in the living room, voicing her frustration that everyone seemed to be against her. My parents sat on the sofa, appearing weary, while Josh was conspicuously absent. Happy now? Ashley snarled the moment she spotted me. It's all your fault Josh left. He can't bring himself to confront Mom and Dad. I responded with composure. Don't blame me for that. You clearly don't get it, she retorted. You assume I'm just a pampered child, but I've been carrying a huge weight. Josh has been jobless for almost a year, and we kept it quiet because we were afraid of your judgment. I was taken aback. I had no idea Josh was out of work. Why didn't you reach out for assistance rather than using up all that cash? We believed we were capable of managing things independently. But things deteriorated, leaving me as the villain, she confessed, her voice revealing a rare moment of candor. I felt a pang of sympathy for her. Then, with a bitterness that pierced through her words, she added, "And naturally, you couldn't resist taking advantage of my misfortune." "This isn't what this is concerning," I stated, shaking my head. My only goal was for Mom and Dad to understand the reality. "Well, congrats, mission done," she snapped back. Before I could respond, before another word could be uttered, Dad rose to his feet and firmly stated, "That's enough. We've all erred in the past, but this constant bickering isn't beneficial to anyone. Ashley, you must own up to your choices. And Kevin, you're not exempt from accountability either. We should have offered support when you faced job loss. We are a family, and it's time we started behaving as such." This was an uncommon instance of Dad being clear-sighted. He rarely acknowledged his errors. I wasn't certain how sincere his family unity message was, but for the first time in ages, I sensed a glimmer of hope that perhaps we could finally make a positive shift. Despite the significant harm inflicted over the years, it was at least a beginning. A heavy silence hung in the air before Ashley finally mumbled, "Whatever," and marched away to her old room. I lingered for a while longer, discussing everything that had transpired with Mom and Dad. They appeared resolute in their desire to mend things with me, a feeling that was unusual after years of being treated as an outsider. However, I wasn't prepared to simply forgive them. They would need to prove themselves worthy of my trust once more. Before I could exit, Dad called me back at the door. "Speaking of that trip, we've been researching some destinations. We'd be thrilled if you joined us." I paused and finally agreed. "I'll give it some consideration." Upon arriving home, I received a text from Grandma. "Proud of you, Kevin. You deserve better." Her words struck me more deeply than anticipated. She was my steadfast supporter, always in my corner. This message, however, signaled a potential shift, as if my parents were finally starting to understand. Yet, I was aware that our family's issues weren't resolved. There were still significant rifts to heal, and Ashley, I sensed her troubles were merely on the horizon. A call from Grandma came sooner than anticipated, ringing early the next morning. Her voice was composed, yet a new edge to her tone caught my attention, a quality I hadn't noticed in years. "Kevin," she started, "there's something you ought to know about your sister." I sat up, a wave of foreboding washing over me. "What has she done now?" Grandma let out a weary sigh. "She arrived late last night, intoxicated and in a rage, furious with me for continually backing you. She claimed you had driven Mom and Dad to oppose her, and blamed me for spoiling you." I wasn't shocked. Ashley's unwavering pursuit of being the golden child was well known. Given last night's events, it was understandable she'd feel her carefully crafted image was falling apart. However, what Grandma said next took me completely by surprise. "She attempted to intimidate me, Kevin. Is that even possible?" "Hold on, intimidate? What exactly are you saying?" "She threatened that if I didn't rectify the situation, she would spread rumors about my mental state, attempt to seize control of my finances, and persuade your parents that I was incapable of living independently." I was flabbergasted. Did she really say that? Grandma's tone turned cold. "Yes, she did, but she clearly hadn't anticipated my resistance. I made it clear I wouldn't be manipulated by my own granddaughter. I threatened to involve the authorities if she didn't depart. And did she go?" My question was laced with anxiety, a knot of dread tightening in my chest. "Initially, she attempted to intimidate me, claiming I wouldn't follow through. But you understand me, Kevin, I'm not one for theatrics. I promptly contacted the police in her presence. That finally frightened her into fleeing, like a true coward." I was stunned by what Ashley was saying. While she'd always been skilled at manipulation, this crossed the line, threatening Grandma simply to get revenge on me. It was utterly beyond anything I could have foreseen. How could she have gone to such extremes? I questioned, shaking my head in disbelief. "It's straightforward," Grandma stated. "She's consumed by desperation. You've consistently unveiled her deceptions, and for years, your parents held her up as the ideal daughter. Now that facade has crumbled, and she blames you for its destruction. Her attacks stem from fear of losing her grip. I was speechless, caught between anger and sadness. Ashley had always been driven to outdo me, craving the spotlight, but this was the moment I truly saw the vulnerability beneath her carefully constructed world. Io pulo disse, grenno, I murmured softly. No, it's not your responsibility, she countered. Ashley made her own decisions. However, you need to be cautious. I don't believe she's finished trying to stir up problems. Right, I figured as much, I mumbled. Grandma took a moment before saying, know that you're not isolated in this, Kevin. Your parents are beginning to understand the reality, and I'll always be there for you. Don't allow her to affect you. My word is my bond, I declared. The call ended, and I sat lost in thought for what felt like hours, reflecting on everything that had transpired. Ashley was clearly struggling, and I knew another reckless action was imminent. However, this time, I was determined not to be dragged down by her choices. News of the incident at Grandma's traveled quickly, reaching my parents before I even had a chance to tell them. Grandma had already given them the full story, and it proved to be the breaking point. My parents immediately severed all ties with Ashley. No financial assistance, no emotional support. They refused her calls, blocked her on all platforms, and made it abundantly clear that she was not welcome back until she acknowledged her wrongdoing. The situation was bizarre. The parents who had always been her staunch supporters were suddenly finished with her. Ashley struggled to cope, trying every tactic. Angry messages, appeals to guilt, even visiting her father at work. But nothing had any effect. Gradually, she drifted out of our lives. For weeks, I heard little from her. Josh, on the other hand, formally moved out and initiated divorce proceedings. He wasn't a perfect person, but it seems even he had reached his breaking point with her. I assumed Ashley was likely staying on friends' couches, waiting for an opportunity to get back on her feet. A couple of months down the line, she unexpectedly appeared at my parents' home. I wasn't home at the time, but my mom gave me the rundown on what transpired. She showed up at our door unexpectedly, Mom told me on the phone. She looked terrible, as if she hadn't been sleeping or eating well for ages. What was she hoping for? I inquired, though the answer was already clear in my mind. She confided that she had no other options, pleading with us to allow her to stay, even temporarily. She expressed her willingness to make a fresh start and rectify past mistakes. But our answer was a firm no. I have to admit, I was completely stunned. You actually refused her? Absolutely, Mom stated resolutely. Your father and I decided we couldn't continue to support her harmful actions. We made it clear that she had to accept responsibility for what she'd done, both to us and to you, and wouldn't be allowed to stay until she did. What was her reaction? She wasn't receptive, Mom confessed. She became upset, claiming we deserted her, alleging we were under your and Grandma's influence. However, we held firm. In the end, she departed. A sigh escaped my lips, one I hadn't even known I was holding. This time, my parents had made their stance clear, and it was an unusual sight. A pang of sympathy for Ashley, my sister, flickered within me, but another part of me felt a sense of justified satisfaction. She'd always seemed to evade repercussions, always been the apple of their eye. Now, she was finally experiencing the weight of her actions. What's her next move, in your opinion? I inquired. I'm not sure, Mom replied gently. All I can do is hope she finds a solution. But Kevin, we won't allow her to damage our family any further. We've reached our limit. That revelation brought a peculiar feeling of finality. For years, I'd been the overlooked one, while Ashley received all the advantages. Now, the situation had reversed. Some days later, word reached me via a mutual acquaintance that Ashley was residing in a low-budget motel on the outskirts of town. She was jobless, without a husband, and lacked any familial support system. She had severed all ties. For the initial time in her existence, she was utterly independent. A few months went by, and Ashley seemingly vanished. Information about her became scarce, both for me and my parents. Whispers circulated among family and friends that she had relocated to a city a few hours distant. The precise location was a mystery, and frankly, no one appeared particularly interested in uncovering it. It seemed as if everyone had finally realized her true nature, a manipulator who craved control and couldn't tolerate relinquishing it. From my perspective, things began to turn around for the better. My parents were genuinely trying harder. We spent more quality time together, engaging in relaxed conversations free from the usual strain, and even discussed the events that had transpired over the years. They acknowledged that they hadn't treated me fairly, particularly after I lost my employment. While it wasn't an instant transformation, it felt as though we were finally forging a genuine family bond. The road trip Dad had talked about finally happened, just my parents and me. Initially, it felt strange, with an unspoken tension, like we were all unsure how to behave without Ashley there. However, as the trip progressed, that awkwardness dissipated. We found ourselves laughing, reminiscing, and for the first time in ages, I wasn't left feeling like the unwanted third wheel. In contrast, Ashley took a different tactic. Following months of radio silence, she contacted me once more. However, this time she omitted the threats and accusations, opting instead to portray herself as the victim. "Kevin, I realize I made a mistake," she confessed in a message. "I apologize for everything that's happened. I've been enduring a lot lately. Josh ended things with me. My parents have rejected me. And now I'm completely isolated. I'm desperate. Please can we at least talk?" I contemplated the message for an extended period. A sliver of hope within me yearned to believe her words. Perhaps she genuinely was prepared for a transformation. However, a more discerning part of me, the wiser one, recognized the truth. I'd witnessed this cycle repeatedly. Ashley's outreach wasn't driven by concern for me. It stemmed from a desire for something, and I wouldn't allow myself to be deceived once more. Silence met her attempts. My parents, too, remained unresponsive when she reached out again. They had grown weary of her antics. As of my last update, Ashley remained in that new city, living independently. She had secured a part-time position and was managing financially, though she hadn't achieved any significant breakthroughs. There was no dramatic resurgence, only her solitude and the ongoing effort to reconstruct the life she had damaged through her own decisions. It's peculiar. My feelings toward her have completely shifted. The resentment I once harbored has faded, replaced by something else entirely. I no longer hate her, nor do I feel sorry for her. She chose her path, and now she must face the consequences. Things are finally improving for me. My parents and I have a good relationship now, and they no longer view me as someone separate from the family. I'm actively seeking new employment opportunities and making strides to get my life back in order. It's remarkable how a change in perspective can lead to positive transformations. For the first time, I feel like I'm seen as a valued member of my family, not just someone defined by their perceived shortcomings. Simply being Kevin is enough for me right now. Thus concluded Ash's story. It seems those who strive for absolute control often find themselves losing everything in the end. Ash, it appears, learned this lesson the difficult way.